Let's talk about boundaries. Generally speaking, boundaries refer to the physical barriers we implement to define physical touch and proximity between ourselves and others. Boundaries can be visible with body language, eye language. Boundaries can be palpable with verbal expression and the energy that is being expressed in the moment. For example, if I were to say, don't say that, don't touch me. Why are you looking at me like that? Ooh, get away. Boundaries. With intention, we can even set up boundaries between our past and our present. And this is really interesting. It's called proper gating of information. This type of boundary setting can be extremely helpful to us as we are giving ourselves permission to be better versions of ourselves and move further away from our past, learning what is necessary for us to grow and expand our consciousness, while at the same time giving ourselves permission to move forward, let the past be the past, and launch into a better version of ourselves. So boundaries can protect us from cycling in the past or tripping too much in the future if we know how to set them up properly. From a neuroscience perspective, when processing sensory data, we identify stimulus and evaluate this stimulus. Boundaries help a person control and moderate information in such a way that helps us identify stimuli at a pace that works for us, as opposed to being overstimulated by circumstances and situations and feeling like we don't have a way to process or organize that information or experience. Without proper boundaries, people may become overstimulated in situations and feel afraid, rejected. They may feel shame, humiliation, or uncomfortable vulnerability. In other words, without healthy boundaries, we are often triggered by people, circumstances, events, etc. So different types of boundaries exist. They can be healthy, they can be loose, they can be rigid, or of course, they can be non-existent. Sometimes the boundaries implemented or the lack thereof are actually a trauma response associated with a previous experience. And so if we're going to talk about boundaries, we should also take a moment and talk about attachment styles, which are developed in early childhood. People with secure attachment usually have healthy boundaries, including flexibility, based on situation and person. Depending on how safe they feel with a person, they can be pretty flexible, although they have strong boundaries. Because they have strong boundaries and a secure attachment, there's some flexibility rather than rigidity or loose boundaries. They're healthy boundaries. With insecure attachment, the boundaries tend to be looser, inconsistent, or even non-existent, including undefined parameters and a lot of gray areas. When people have insecure attachment, they may not have really learned how to implement effective boundaries. And then with avoidant attachment style, also known as dismissive attachment, the boundaries are very rigid. They include extreme and inappropriate or impermeable and unchangeable, rules, walls, boundaries. So the human brain organizes itself rapidly in infancy and in early childhood in response to outer experiences. As the child's brain soaks in information, it then reorganizes information that it's taking in by forming new neural connections. Actively engaged neurons strengthen these connections. Emotional experiences increase the strength of these neural connections over time. Repeated experiences that are highly emotionally charged and our response to them reinforce the boundaries that we've set up that develop over time, or the boundaries that we never set up and cease to exist. Regardless to what was created in early childhood or modeled by early caregivers, we can repattern and reprogram the brain now in the present moment by authentically assessing what is needed for a sense of wholeness and protection. And this is on every level, emotional, physical, and relational. So in real time, in the present moment, by just assessing or reassessing what is needed for us to feel whole in an authentic way, we can create a sense of protection for ourselves. From a dialectical behavioral therapy, healthy boundaries create 9 skills. Those 9 skills are: 1, you can reorganize your emotions. 2, you can overcome barriers to healthy emotions so that you can experience healthy emotions. 3, you can reduce your physical vulnerability. So, although I'm talking a lot about, the emotional boundaries that we set up, obviously physical boundaries can be necessary as well to create physical protection and reduce vulnerability. 4, they can reduce cognitive vulnerability so that we aren't stuck in the past, so that we don't put ourselves in situations where we feel judged by ourselves or others, so that we are not living so much in the future that we are constantly anxious about, you know, what's going to come and the fear of the unknown. 5, we can increase positive emotions. 6, we can become mindful of emotions without judgment. So you notice the anxiety, you notice the stress, you notice the fear or the worry or the nervousness without judging yourself. Boundaries. Okay, yeah, I feel that. It's okay. I'm going to get through it. I got this. 7, emotion exposure or tolerance. Healthy boundaries allow us to recognize an emotion, feel that emotion, tolerate that emotion, expose ourselves to that emotion without becoming dysregulated. Let's say, for example, you have a family member who tends to be pretty drama based, highly charged emotionally. Everything is loud, everything is emotional. With healthy boundaries within yourself, you can learn to be around that highly charged person and all that drama or emotional intensity without it dysregulating you. Now, it does take practice. It's not easily done, but boundaries certainly are a catalyst for remaining self-regulated as opposed to dysregulated. Number 8, you can learn to do the opposite of your emotional urges when required for protection. So, for example, if your go-to is, vulnerability. Maybe you feel very vulnerable, very open. That's the emotional urge. You want to open up and maybe tell your life story to a complete stranger, because that's what you do. You've done this your whole life, and it doesn't serve. It doesn't make you feel better. Um, Boundaries can help you do the opposite. You want to open up, you want to tell your life story to the person you just met, but boundaries will prevent you from doing that and hold that urge within, and then find a healthier way to express yourself. Maybe that is talk to a safe person, a friend or a family member. Maybe it's journal the feelings as opposed to oversharing with someone you don't know, or even that you do know that can't handle your truth. Or perhaps you go and seek out a professional like a life coach or a therapist or a psychiatrist or somebody, you know, who you can talk to about what you're feeling. And then number 9, boundaries help us problem solve more effectively. So, in a variety of contexts, when we give ourselves permission to establish healthy boundaries, they can help us observe our own thoughts moment by moment. Boundaries can help us notice and soothe our own dysregulated nervous system. Boundaries can offer a very interesting type of care for our minds and our bodies in any given moment. Boundaries help us approach feelings that come up with kindness and acceptance instead of judging ourselves for being human and feeling certain things. Boundaries help us focus on what is helpful, appropriate, positive, and useful in any situation, rather than being scattered and dysregulated. Boundaries help us stay focused on the present moment rather than bringing in triggers from the past or potential future. And finally, boundaries help us enjoy the goodness that is available in any given moment or situation. Now, I've given you a lot of information. I've talked about, you know, what boundaries are. I briefly talked about attachment styles, given you a little bit of neuroscience to back up, how boundaries work. Now let's just take a nice deep breath, inhaling deeply, exhaling deeply, relaxing the shoulders down away from the ears. And in this moment, let's give ourselves permission to clear the energetic residue associated with poor boundaries from the past or rigid boundaries or loose boundaries or non-existent boundaries. Let's just breathe. Inhale, exhale, clear the energy, any residue of what no longer serves. And in this new unit of time, with a nice deep breath, let's give ourselves permission to set or establish healthy boundaries as needed in a variety of situations with a variety of people and circumstances that always serve our highest good. Recognizing that boundaries can be mental, they may be emotional, they may be physical, they may be relational, financial, dietary. So many areas of our lives may require boundaries. Let's give ourselves permission to establish healthy boundaries where needed in order to remain self-regulated, to become the best version of ourselves, and to release what doesn't work and what is no longer serving.